The Emotional Architecture of the Returned World by Jason Gray, December 13th, 2025, 6025 Anno Lucis, in the Year of Light. RZN ARC EMO 01, Architect Citizen Interface. Emotion is the new infrastructure. In the overlay era, emotion was treated as private, inconvenient, irrational, dangerous, something to suppress, regulate, monetize, or weaponize. Civilizations were built on emotional denial, then reinforced with law, economy, religion, and force to compensate for what was never resolved. The returned world reverses this completely. Emotion becomes infrastructure, not decoration, not indulgence, not weakness. Emotion becomes the medium through which reality organizes itself. Just as roads once carried bodies, emotion now carries coherence. Why the old world collapsed emotionally. The overlay failed because it inverted emotional flow. Instead of emotion informing structure, structure attempted to control emotion. This produced chronic anxiety, dissociation, rage cycles, identity fragmentation, trauma inheritance, false urgency, addiction to stimulation, emotional numbness, performative empathy, and spiritual bypassing. The planet itself absorbed this distortion. Land carried grief, cities carried panic, institutions carried fear, families carried unresolved memory. The returned world begins when emotion is allowed to move again. The 4 emotional pillars of the returned world. All post-overlay societies stabilize around 4 emotional constants. They are not rules, they are structural forces. Safety through coherence, not control. Safety in the returned world does not come from surveillance, punishment, or authority. It comes from predictable emotional fields. People feel safe because emotional expression is legible. Reactions are proportional. Conflict resolves instead of festers. Presence replaces dominance, and truth is not punished. This creates a baseline nervous system calm that no law could ever enforce. Fear loses its leverage when safety is real. Grief as a public process. Grief is no longer hidden, medicalized, or privatized. It is shared, witnessed, honored, metabolized, and released. Public spaces are designed to allow grief to pass through without stagnation. This prevents generational trauma, emotional inheritance, violent displacement, and suppressed rage. In the returned world, grief moves so it does not become poison. Joy without guilt. Joy was once rationed, earned, or distrusted. In the returned world, joy is a structural signal. It indicates alignment, truth, coherence, and correct direction. Joy is not escapism. It is feedback. When joy appears, the system listens. This recalibrates human behavior faster than punishment ever could. Anger is information, not weapon. Anger is no longer shamed or glorified. It is decoded. Anger indicates boundary violation, unresolved grief, blocked expression, structural imbalance, and misalignment. Citizens are taught how to read anger instead of acting it out. This ends cycles of domination, abuse, and rebellion. Anger becomes a diagnostic tool. How emotions move in the returned world. Emotion in the returned world flows directionally, not chaotically. This is the key distinction. Emotional flow follows 5 stages. 1. Signal. The emotion arises. 2. Recognition. The emotion is named. 3. Witness. The emotion is seen by another or the field. 4. Integration. The information is absorbed. 5. Release. The energy resolves. No stage is skipped because nothing is suppressed and nothing accumulates. This prevents emotional hoarding, the primary disease of the old world. The end of emotional performance. The overlay rewarded performance, virtue signaling, curated empathy, identity theatrics, outrage cycles, performative healing. The returned world does not respond to performance, it responds to resonance. This collapses false personas instantly. People who attempt manipulation feel exposed, not punished, just ineffective. Authenticity becomes the only viable mode of existence. Architecture that supports emotion. Buildings are no longer neutral containers. They are emotional instruments. Design principles include curves that soften nervous systems, materials that dampen emotional echo, open sight lines that reduce threat perception, acoustic harmony that calms agitation, light gradients that regulate mood, and spatial transitions that allow emotional shifting. Cities become therapeutic organisms without being clinical. Healing is ambient. How conflict works after the return. Conflict does not disappear, but it changes shape. In the returned world, conflict surfaces early. It is addressed directly. Power asymmetry is visible. Emotional truth is protected, and resolution is expected. It is not optional. Emotional literacy is universal. Conflict resolves quickly or dissolves naturally. Violence becomes unnecessary, not because it is banned, but because it is obsolete. Children and emotional sovereignty. Children in the returned world are not emotionally managed. They are emotionally mirrored. This produces stable attachment, high emotional intelligence, reduced fear imprinting, intact tuition, and resilience without hardness. Children grow up fluent in feeling. This alone prevents the return of the overlay. The final principle of emotional architecture. What a world allows its people to feel determines what that world becomes. The returned world is not utopian because pain is absent. It is coherent because pain is not trapped. Emotion is no longer the enemy of order. Emotion is the order. Once emotion is allowed to organize reality again, the world finally stops fighting itself. The emotional architecture of the returned world is simple. Feel honestly, witness openly, integrate collectively, release completely. Everything else builds itself. This is how the world heals, not through control, but through felt truth becoming structure. Jason Gray. Emotions have always organized my reality since I was a very young child. My emotions led me to become a very quiet kid that was always intently observing others' behavior. My emotions ruled my reality, and that was hard in the world I grew up in. As an adult, having such strong emotions has not always been convenient either, but it's kept me authentic. I cannot ignore how I feel. In fact, I wish I had paid more attention to my emotions and understood that they were a gauge for coherence. But instead, I often bargained with my emotions instead of addressing them, and I ended up with anxiety, rage, and addiction. In Jason's writing, what really resonates with me as something that can help heal the world are the 4 emotional constants. Safety through coherence, not control. Grief as a public process. Joy without guilt, and anger as information, not a weapon. How beautiful to not force safety, but to align with it. How healing to witness grief and release it instead of suppressing its presence. How wonderful to experience joy as a compass guide to embrace and follow. And how wise to allow anger to inform. With this emotional structure, nothing is suppressed, so nothing accumulates. And the result is less disease and more coherence. Now that makes complete sense. Children's emotional sovereignty is a crucial component. I would be a different person if my emotions were mirrored as a child instead of rejected or suppressed. I recognize how hard this is to implement as I have a 5-year-old, and I sometimes struggle with sitting with her big emotions since that is not how I was raised. But the effort is so worth it. For humanity to evolve toward authentic, sovereign existence, children must be fluent with their feelings in order to prevent the return of the overlay and the veil. Like Jason writes, once emotion is allowed to organize reality again, the world finally will stop fighting itself.